Hello my darlings, my name is Stephanie and welcome to my series on the ghost stories and spooky tales of Britain. This series is a brief and short look at some of the haunted places in Britain and the spooky ghost stories attached to them. Today we don't just have a building or a property that is haunted, we have an entire village. And not just any village, but supposedly the most haunted village in Britain. Ooh. Down in the Kentish countryside is the village of Pluckley. It's already a kind of famous village as it was featured in The Darling Buds of May back in the 90s. Some of you may remember that show. Pluckley has a spooky reputation though. As I said, it is said to be the most haunted village in Britain, and even the Guinness Book of Records agreed. There are reports of around 14, 15-ish ghosts, but they supposedly have 12 official ghosts. It first received the spooky title back in 1989. However, the category is no longer in use by Guinness World Records, so I'm not sure if it still holds the title of the most haunted village in Britain. Pluckley has around 1,000 residents, so it's a pretty small place. It's a typical English village, very picturesque and quaint. You wouldn't think, to look at it, that there would be spirits and ghosts roaming the area. Pluckley is very popular in October, and apparently there is quite a high volume of paranormal enthusiasts who come to visit the most haunted village in Britain. For centuries, ghost stories have been a part of the village. Here are a few of the ghostly residents. First of all, there is a ghostly horse-drawn carriage. According to locals, the spectre has been sighted along with the sound of horses' hooves. It has been seen and heard quite a lot. In fact, in 1997, a driver almost crashed when they heard the clippity-clop of hooves on cobbles in their car. Another time, a woman was coming home after babysitting and she saw the phantom carriage being pulled by the horses with bright lights shining from the carriage windows. There is a road named Frith Corner, also known as Fright Corner, and it is aptly named because the ghost of a highwayman is said to appear. In the 18th century, it is believed that a highwayman was killed there after getting into a fight with some lawmen. They pinned him to an oak tree using a sword. Their fight and the highwayman's defeat is reenacted. There is a ghost who is said to appear just before a thunderstorm. There are many versions of this ghost story, but the most famous one tells of Richard Dickey Buss, a well-known figure in the village last century, who now haunts the ruined and abandoned windmill called the Pinnocks. Dickey shut the mill in the 1930s, which was then destroyed 9 years later by a fire after being struck by lightning. His spirit remains there to this day. There is a lane which is named after him, Dickey Buss's Lane. Even the lane has a ghostly story linked to it. A man died by suicide in the 1920s and his hanging body was found by Dickey several weeks later. The ghostly body has apparently been seen hanging from the tree. Rose Court is a Grade 2 listed building built in the early 19th century. Rose Court is supposedly haunted by the ghost of a Tudor lady. She was said to either be a member of the Deering family or the mistress of a member of the Deering family, and she died by suicide, having drunk a fatal concoction of juices of ivy and other poisonous berries. She can be heard calling for her 2 dogs between the hours of 4 and 5 p.m, which is when she is supposed to have died. She has not been heard for many years now, though. The Tudor lady, according to local legend, may be connected to another house in the village. Greystones is a large house built in 1863. It was originally called Rectory Cottage as it was the home of the rector of St. Nicholas Church nearby. The house is said to be haunted by a ghostly monk, a reclusive cleric who was the house's former owner. Since it was renamed Greystones, the monk seems to have disappeared, hidden himself away, as there haven't been any sightings of him since then. The local legend that links the two speaks of some sort of relationship between the Tudor lady and the monk. They were either friends, lovers, or involved in a love triangle, depending on who you ask. He is said to have died of a broken heart, and she died by suicide as a result. She died by a window gazing out towards Greystones. Such a romantically tragic story, which is most likely not true. Finding actual witnesses to either ghost apparently is quite tricky, and also neither house existed at the time these two were supposed to have been alive. It makes for a very good ghost story though, admittedly. There is a spirit known as the Screaming Man. An accident occurred at the old brickworks and clay pit. A worker was smothered to death by a wall of clay and drowned, and people claim to still hear his screams of agony from the site of the brickworks. Lady Deering was a member of the ancient Deering family. She was buried in the graveyard of St. Nicholas Church, the local church. She is said to be a dark-haired woman in a bright red gown. She gained the nickname the Red Lady, quite obvious, due to her red gown, and she is said to wander the graveyard and wail while she searches for the grave of her stillborn baby. Another ghost that is said to have been seen in the vicinity of St. Nicholas is the White Lady. She has also been seen in the family library in her old family home, Surrenden Deering Manor. It is believed that she lived during the 12th century. The White Lady is said to be a beautiful woman who was a member of the Deering family, and she died young. In order to preserve her beauty in death, she was buried in multiple lead coffins. The number varies between 2 and 7 coffins. These coffins were then sealed in an oak coffin and laid to rest in the family vault at St. Nicholas Church. She was buried in a white gown with a single red rose. She has been seen in the churchyard on misty nights and also in the chapel itself where she was buried. During the First and Second World Wars, Surrenden Deering was used as a base for a US embassy. One Christmas Eve, a Mr. Walter Winans was wandering the dark rooms of the manor alone. He had his hunting rifle with him. He suddenly found himself face to face with the apparition of the White Lady in the library. Terrified, he took a shot at her. It obviously went straight through her, and she vanished through a panel in the wall, an area which supposedly led to a tunnel linking the house to the church. The grand house was destroyed in a fire in 1952, and she hasn't been seen since. Unfortunately, as much as we'd all like to believe in these ghost stories, me particularly, it seems like there was a bit of shadiness going on in the village, which could disprove quite a few of the stories. Desmond Carrington, who used to live in Pluckley, he was a little bit naughty because he admitted to concocting a whole string of ghost stories for an article featured in the TV Times back in the 1950s. So he may be responsible for quite a few of the stories I have told you today. It isn't just the village that has a spooky reputation. The nearby Deering Woods has a rather chilling name, the Screaming Woods. It has become quite the tourist trap. There are many ghost tours to the creepy woods, and you can even stay overnight if you feel brave enough. The Screaming Woods certainly lives up to its name, with many people hearing sounds of screaming men and women after dark. They are said to be the screams of those who died while lost in the spooky woods. Many people from nearby villages say they have seen black shadows following them while they travelled through the forest. There is a ghost of a highwayman robber who was captured, lynched and decapitated by angry villagers in the 18th century, and he is said to wander the woodlands. I stumbled across a couple of really interesting and mysterious stories about the woods. Missing students and 20 bodies that were found in the woods. I looked more into them and then I eventually found that they were creepypastas. If you don't know what creepypastas are, they are horror-themed stories, usually very creepy and involve the paranormal often, and they're shared online. So these stories weren't true, but they were really well done. They kind of convinced me at first until I delved a bit further into them. So that is the most haunted village in England. As I mentioned earlier, some of the ghost stories were potentially made up, and there do seem to be a lot of versions of the ghost stories, but the village does have a spooky reputation. Regardless of whether they are true or not, I hope you enjoyed today's ghost stories. Which haunted place should I look into next? Let me know down in the comments if you have any suggestions. Thank you so much for watching and spending time with me today, and I hope you join me on my next video. Please give this one a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And until next time, stay spooky.